I moved to South Korea for university when I turned 18. I'm now 21, and this happened over 2 years ago. Whilst there has definitely been unwanted attention from some guys in the past, most of them get the message that I'm not interested. This, however, was a little more unsettling. The university I go to has an institute for language, which is where all of my classes were at the time, and it's pretty common knowledge that most foreigners in this part of Korea would know of or study at this institute. It's not abnormal for me to receive random Facebook requests from guys wanting to learn English or make foreign friends, and most of the time I just ignore them unless we have a few mutual friends or I've met them before. I got a friend request from this guy named Nico, and we had quite a handful of mutual friends, and he'd messaged me too saying he was sorry for the randomness of the request, but he was just trying to make as many foreign friends as he could. I thought, what the heck, and I accepted and messaged him back saying it was no bother. From what I could tell by his Facebook photos, he was heavily pierced and tattooed and stated he was Japanese, but had studied in Canada and could speak good English, and also a foreigner studying at my university. After a few days, he'd messaged me again and I replied, and it was casual conversation, and he would often bring up maybe meeting for coffee or a movie, which I declined, until he started getting more aggressive for no reason. Every time I'd make a comment, he'd find some way to turn it into an argument, which grew tiring super fast, so I just ignored him. He'd often ask if I had a boyfriend, to which I'd reply no, and he'd bluntly say that we should be together. It was at this point where I decided I didn't really want anything to do with him, so I politely declined on the basis I didn't know him, we'd never meet, and we hadn't even known each other a week. He didn't take my refusal well, and began throwing insults at me based on my looks and saying overly graphic things that he'd do to me if he ever saw me. Apparently I was being stupid not to take him up on the offer, because I'd never do better than him and he'd make me see that. It creeped me out beyond belief, so I just blocked and deleted him on Facebook and tried to forget about it. I mentioned it to a friend of mine and she immediately knew exactly who I was talking about. Apparently I was not the first girl he added on Facebook and tried to bully into meeting him and being his girlfriend. After asking a few more of my friends who we'd had as mutual friends on Facebook, they'd all described pretty similar situations involving this Nico. One girl even told me that she'd given him the benefit of the doubt and met with him, and it turned out that he didn't even go to our university, but actually lived over an hour away and would travel there daily, probably to watch and obsess over which girl he would find on Facebook next. He told her he was born in America and had never been to Japan, yet he told me he was Japanese and studied in Canada, so who knows how much of what he said to anyone was actually true. I felt a bit freaked out by this, but tried not to let it bother me. I'd never see him around and I'd blocked him, so I forgot about it. And that was until about a week or two later I received a message from him on Facebook on another account saying how he'd seen me that day at school. This shook me up a bit, since I hadn't even considered that he might actually be watching me at school. I ignored the message and blocked the account. A few days later, I got numerous messages from different accounts claiming to be Nico's friends, saying how he had his account hacked and could I please unblock him so he could explain and we could talk it over. I ignored these messages too, but I kept receiving more, all of which I am pretty sure were just Nico himself trying to reach out to me to get my attention. The more I ignored him, the more violent and aggressive the messages became, and I could tell that most of the time when he said he'd seen me, he was lying. He'd say things like, "I saw you today at the library all day, you fucking slut. You're a fucking four-eyed slut who can't get laid," and other messages to that extent. I knew he was clutching at straws because I never used the school's library to study, and although I wear glasses, I never wear them in public. So I just kept blocking the accounts and tried not to let it bother me, figuring he was just some desperate idiot. I figured he'd get bored of me soon enough and let it go. Until one day after classes had finished and I was browsing the small convenience store in the building to grab a drink on my way home. I opened up the fridge to get a bottle of water when I closed the door. He was literally standing right beside me. He didn't say anything, he was just staring at me. I hadn't seen him in person before because I had never agreed to meet him, but I knew straight away it was him. And I freaked out. I dropped the bottle and I just left the store. I didn't walk home because I was afraid he'd follow me and find out where I lived. So I just went back into school and stayed around areas where there were lots of people until a friend of mine came to meet me. After that, I saw him a handful of times when I'd leave class. He'd just be standing there doing nothing in particular, watching people as they walked past, and he'd stare at me intently. I'd made sure to always be with friends when I went to and from class and didn't go anywhere alone for a while, but after a week or so the messages stopped and I didn't see him again. The last time I heard from him was a year ago when he messaged me on yet a new Facebook account asking if we could be friends again because he'd changed and it was all just a joke. Needless to say, I ignored the message, blocked the account, and will not be taking up his offer on being friends. I dated my last serious boyfriend for around 6 years, and throughout the whole of those 6 years, I always received pokes off of a fellow on Facebook. I didn't think too much of it, and we had like 30 friends in common, so I figured maybe I had met him somewhere along the way. Besides, he was muscly and quite attractive, so having the additional attention was fun, I guess. A couple of weeks after my ex and I split, he private messaged me asking me if we could meet. We chatted for a while and I eventually agreed to go for a meal with him. On first date terms, it was a pretty lovely one. Nice meal, walk under the stars, blah blah blah. After a few weeks of seeing him, I noticed little traits in his behavior that I found to be particularly strange. He would never let me in his house and would leave me standing outside. One day I stood outside of his house for 45 minutes at 10:30 p.m. as we had walked there. I didn't know where the hell I was, and he decided that I had given him the hump for no apparent reason. This is where I should have bailed out. The following Friday, I figured I would give him the benefit of the doubt and invited him round. He stayed for 9 days. I had to text a friend asking her to pick me up and not invite him just to get him out. I figured I would leave it now until he turned up on my doorstep the next day. I told him I wasn't very well and that I had a pretty serious urinary tract infection, which was met with a lot of accusations of cheating and even being a slag. This was the final straw, and I told him to leave and not to bother contacting me. Every day I received text after text, missed call after missed call. I blocked him on Facebook, so he messaged all of my friends begging them to convince me to take him back. Hell no. I figured that after some time he would back away. Things went quiet for about a week. It was bliss until I received a call off a number I didn't know. It was asking me who the man was who had just walked in front of my door. It was my father, by the way. This happened every time someone walked in front of my flat. Male, female, it didn't matter. Turned out he knew someone who lived across the street from me and had him and his lovely girlfriend watching my every move. Things calmed down again after speaking to the couple and explaining the grief it had caused me. He told them that he was still together with me and he was concerned for my safety. And I thought he had got the message until one day when I finished work and caught the bus home. I had this perfectly timed so that I would always be pulling up to my estate at 6 p.m. As I strolled down the hill to my estate, ready to cut through the alley towards the garages, I noticed a figure tucked away in the shadows in the corner. It was him. I kept my head up and marched onwards to my front door. He followed a distance behind until I reached the door and ran after me and chased me up the stairs in the block of flats I lived in. I told him I wasn't interested, that he was scaring me, and that he needed help. And this is where he thought that maybe a hug would change my mind in this situation. After letting out a massive scream from my neighbor, he was escorted out of the building and was told that if he returned, it probably would be the last thing he had ever done. At least I have learned now not to date people off of Facebook and at least run a background check on any future partners. I'm an uninteresting man in my late 20s with a stable job and happy family. Being so, I had never even entertained the thought that I might, one day, be the target of a stalker. So here's my story as a warning to everyone. You don't have to be a typical, pretty young lady to catch the eye of a stalker. I don't know if this makes sense, but I am a habitual yet very casual Facebook user. I don't post a lot, but I do check my news feed often. One Saturday night, I was doing a quick round on Facebook before I went to bed when I received a friend request. I accepted it without hesitation. Just about every friend request I receive gets accepted because I don't ever post anything very personal. As I said, I have a very casual approach to social networking. I do a quick glance on the profile that had friended me and saw that it was an obviously fake account. Not thinking much of it, I put my computer away and fell asleep. The next day, I was having lunch at a friend's house, having completely forgotten about the friend request from the night before. My phone buzzed and I saw that I had gotten a message from a coworker of mine, Maya. Although Maya and I worked together and had a few mutual friends outside of work, we didn't communicate much other than when it was about work. I checked it, assuming it was work-related. I guess looking back, you can say it was. To get the gist of it, the Facebook account that friended me also friended Maya and had bombarded her with insults and accusations of being a whore, slut, and every name in the book. The person took it a step further by messaging Maya's husband, saying that she was cheating on him with a coworker. Maya wanted to know if I knew who the person was, because I was the only other person that accepted the friend request. I explained to her how I accept every request and have no idea who it was. I then proceeded to unfriend the profile in question. Maya explained to me that she already had suspicions on who it was, but just wanted to see if I could confirm it. She believed it was Carrie. Let's rewind to a few weeks earlier. I had received a friend request from Carrie. It struck me as odd because, although we worked at the same place, we had never met, never spoken, nor had we ever made eye contact or been within 20 feet of each other. We worked in different departments, but I walked past her every day because I had to walk through her department to get to our lounge. That was the furthest extent of our interactions. I only learned her name from when she friended me on Facebook and I recognized her picture. I'm not sure how she found out my name. Carrie also friended my wife's profile and subsequently began to sift through years of my wife's posts and pictures, liking and commenting on several of them. She began interacting with my posts too, as though she knew us as well. At work though, I'd walk by like usual and still no interaction. I found it odd but didn't look too far into it. So back to the present. The mysterious Facebook account continued to harass Maya until she told her that she knew it was Carrie and was going to call the police. I thought that was the end of that, but boy, was I wrong. Over several weeks, I began getting more friend requests from girls looking to hook up with me. Obviously, I knew they were all fake, and for the most part, I ignored them. I also began getting notifications from Google and Facebook accounts about suspicious activity on my profile. Most of the time it warned me of failed login attempts. One I specifically remember said my Facebook account was actually logged in from somewhere unusual and asked whether it was me. It wasn't me, and I should have been more concerned, but for some reason I didn't care at the time. I was stupid, and even after that, I didn't bother to change my password. At the time, I viewed all of these happenings as random, isolated incidents. I had no valuable stuff on my account and didn't have any private secretive messages. What harm could they do, right? A few months pass when one day my wife gets a message from Carrie stating that she had bought a high-end video camera and was looking to start some amateur filming. She wanted to know if we could help her by letting her film our family for a day. Remembering what Maya had said a few months ago, I was reluctant but wanted to give Carrie the benefit of the doubt, so we agreed to tell her that we'd schedule a time for her whenever we weren't busy and left it at that. Once again, I have yet to actually meet Carrie. More weeks pass by and we completely forget about scheduling the film shoot when Carrie messages me about it. I turn her down. Then things got weird. She sent several GIF files of stick figures doing sexually suggestive motions and gyrations. I didn't respond, so she asked, "Funny, isn't it?" I immediately texted my wife to log into my Facebook profile to observe the messages. Not wanting to be rude, I agreed with Carrie as of the humor in the GIFs she sent and carried on the conversation. She proceeded to send me old photos from my abandoned MySpace account that I had completely forgotten about. That was around the time when MySpace had been revamped and people lost a lot of cherished memories. Somehow she dug mine up and decided to share them with me. It was creepy to me. Things escalated quickly from there. She began talking about her body and how she wasn't attractive, trying to bait me into complimenting her looks. She was not beautiful, but she was an attractive person. I didn't bite though. Then she hit me with something out of the blue. She asked me about my penis, calling it my cock and suggesting that it was probably pretty big. I decided that was enough and stopped responding. Of course, my wife was reading the whole time and we were texting back and forth about how funny and weird this all was. I continued to go to work and still awkwardly never actually met Carrie. I especially didn't want to strike up any conversations after that. Carrie messaged me one final time asking for a favor. Maya had blocked her profile and Carrie suspected that Maya was saying bad stuff about her, so she wanted me to check her profile to confirm. I told her that I wasn't going to stalk Maya for her, and that was that. Just between us though, I did check, and no, Maya couldn't care less to waste her time talking about Carrie. Around this time, my wife got a text from an unknown number. The person knew her name but was trying to remain anonymous and was trying to flirt with her. We were with a bunch of friends at the time and we all thought it'd be funny if we all text flirted with this person at the same time to annoy them. Once again, I never thought to connect any of the incidents. Carrie eventually quit work and I never saw her again, but I continued to get suspicious activity and friend requests that I, stupidly, continued to write off. I had all but forgotten about Carrie. Then, I'd say over a year later, I get a bomb from my wife. A good friend of ours texted her that I was sending her very inappropriate messages on Facebook. I had been busy running errands all day and hadn't really checked my Facebook at the time. I found that my password had been changed when I finally logged back on. All of my messages had also been cleared. I had no idea the extent of what happened until I started hearing from people that I was being very suggestive and nasty to them. The thing was, these weren't random women on my friends list that were targeted. These were women that were close to me, good friends, my wife's sisters, my friends' wives. These messages weren't holding back either. They went all out in graphic detail about what I wanted to do to them. I felt completely violated and humiliated. I couldn't imagine how the women felt. My wife and I were really close to our families and friends, and every other week or so, all of our friends would get together and drink, BBQ, watch movies or sports and hang out. We'd seen several families over and never had a problem. All of them said they understood what happened and that they know it wasn't me. Deep inside though, I could see that they felt that it possibly, potentially, probably was me. Over time, more and more of them stopped coming over to the point where my home started to feel empty. I confided in my wife how I felt that they think it was me, and she rebutted that I was just being paranoid. She argued that our friends were just busy with their lives. that they'd eventually come over when they were free again. I then learned that someone had created a Facebook account using my name and picture and had continued harassing the same women. One of them posted a picture of the conversation with this false me on Facebook. She commented that it could really be me because that mystery person has used some words that I typically would. She also stated that the person knew my friends and family extensively. My heart instantly shattered reading that. I quit checking my Facebook for the longest time, and I guess I fell into a mild depression. I felt miserable. I told my wife that I wanted to disappear and strongly considered quitting my job of 7 years and moving away to start anew. I now know that I was being quite irrational, and thankfully my wife stayed strong for me through it all. I felt like I needed to defend my honor and started gathering alibis of times, people, and places I was around during the time of many of those messages. My wife brutally told me that she couldn't believe I was weak enough to let a no-life dumbass on Facebook put me down and make me feel that way. Which is true. I am and always have been a very mentally strong person. I always look for the best in a bad situation, but for some reason this affected me differently. I can't explain why, but I felt extreme shame and guilt for something I didn't even do. Without my wife's support knocking me back to reality, I don't know what would have happened. We advised our friends just to ignore the person, and eventually everything stopped. From time to time, I still get a random friend request, but I don't accept them anymore. I don't have any proof that this was all the work of Carrie. It just all happened during a time when she injected herself into my life and eventually stopped after she left. My friends have started coming over again, but it hasn't felt the same ever since then. I don't know if it's them or just in my head. My wife and I came to the conclusion that Carrie reveled in the misery of others. After tormenting Maya, she moved on and targeted me, trying to ruin my marriage and distance me from friends for no other reason than the fact that she enjoyed doing so. I'm sure she hasn't stopped and only left me alone because she found a new victim to harass. I'm a 20-something woman, American and a Francophile, fluent but not native in French. Since 2011, I've been in correspondence with an eccentric French guy I met because he posted a clip of a super rare telefilm on YouTube. We had a bunch of mutual interests and eventually met in real life so he could give me the movie on a flash drive. He also gifted me a book from his personal library that he thought I would like. We stayed in contact, and I recently returned the favor by buying him a DVD off Amazon. It's been good. Our conversations are enriching, and he's a sweet guy, just odd, as am I. He sort of switches between identities online, his real name, Jean, and then an Italian surname, and a fictional character from Gothic literature. He's very into dark romanticism. I knew him on Facebook under the name of the character, and for a while that was his email address as well, although last summer he started using an address based off his real name, so it was kind of a mix of the two. He can be hard to keep tabs on because he often disappears from Facebook without warning and then reappears as soon as he came. He's gone through 2 or 3 different accounts, all using the fictional character's name. It wasn't a surprise when he vanished sometime last fall, and I just kept my eyes peeled for him. Occasionally I do a search, and one day I found an account with his real name, although not one with the fictional character. There was no face pic, but that was typical. Since he sometimes uses his real name online as well, I added that person, figuring if he wasn't the right person, he would just decline my request / send me a message asking how we knew each other. When he accepted my request without asking me who I was, I figured it was him. This seemed to be confirmed when I first started messaging him in late February. Between then and now, we've exchanged just over 900 messages. I started things where they had left off, saying how it was good to see him back. I had just been thinking of him. I was going to email him something, but now I could do it over Facebook chat, etc. He greeted me warmly, and then when I sent him a YouTube video I thought he'd like, he proceeded to discuss it with me. He was a little less articulate than I remembered, but not so much that it became noticeable, except in hindsight. I think the incoherence isn't quite as glaring to me in French as well, since it's not my native language. And he was odd, but that was normal. In April, he returned to Facebook under the fictional character's name. We added each other and started Facebook chatting. I would chat with the two accounts indiscriminately. They were never online at the same time, so I would just talk to whichever one was on. Again, I noticed that something was off with Jean. He would say things that didn't make sense and then refuse to explain when I said I was confused. He would use flirtatious terms of endearment, which made me uncomfortable. He made a lot of typos that made it hard to follow him too. It was only later that I noticed all the typos, all the cryptic statements and non sequiturs. All the flirtation happened when I was talking to Jean, and not when I was talking to the account with the name of the fictional character. Likewise, all the most legit stuff happened with the fictional character account, like me getting his address to send him the DVD. He was just straight up nicer on that account too. I had some unpleasant arguments with real name Jean and only him. I didn't notice that at the time though, because there otherwise seemed to be a continuity between the two accounts. We discussed the same topics on both, and while the speech patterns were somewhat different, like I said, more lucid and friendly on the fictional character account, there were also notable similarities. The same Italian expressions got used, for instance. Real name Jean called me Bella Ragazza, a flirtatious gesture that made me slightly uncomfortable. Fictional character Jean, while making fun of a Roberto Alagna album cover, called him Bel Oyomo. They both used the expression no problemo at various points. They both complained about the French far right. It seemed seamless, until it wasn't. On Saturday, I saw real name Jean online and started chatting with him, asking him if he heard about all the stuff that had happened that week in the US. When I brought up marriage equality, he became very homophobic, which surprised me because I had known him to be a decent guy. We'd argued about non-binary gender before, but straight up vicious homophobia, slurs, etc., and it came as a shock to me. I started to fight with him and he became very hostile, saying nonsensical and paranoid things like, "If I come to your city, you'll hide with your friends so as not to show your face at the supermarket," and telling me to stop talking to him. None of this made any sense to me given our 4-year history, his past affectionate behavior, etc., and I asked him, "So we're not friends anymore?" trying to figure out what the hell was going on. He responded that friendship means nothing on the internet, which I found bizarre because we met in real life in the summer of 2011 and had been planning to meet again last year, except that he had been out of town. A while later, I saw that fictional character Jean had liked and commented on one of my photos. Another thing I only realized in hindsight was that all the likes and comments were from fictional character Jean, not real name Jean. I went to Facebook chat, only real name Jean was on. I asked him why he was liking my stuff when he told me to stop talking to him. Furious, he responded that he hadn't liked anything. "Where do you see my name?" I said. "Well, not your real name, fictional character." He said, "So?" and told me to fuck off. At this point, I was reeling in confusion. What the fuck was happening? Was he having a dissociative episode? I resolved to talk to real name Jean when he came online to see how he acted towards me, and if he was civil, to confront him with his behavior under his other account. He came on early in the morning, and I rushed to talk to him, both deeply unsettled and dying of curiosity. "Hi, can I talk to you? It's kind of urgent," I said. Him, "Urgent? Sure, what's up?" "So when I was talking to real name Jean, you're the only one I'm talking to, right? This man is you," and I linked to the Facebook page. To which he responded, "Not at all. In fact, I don't have a Facebook account under my real name. This person is simply homonymous." He confirmed that he only been back on Facebook since April, the time when the fictional character account reappeared. He was pretty distressed to learn I'd been talking to this guy for 4 months thinking it was him, and even more distressed to know that the guy was a dick, and I thought even for a moment that he also was a dick. You're probably wondering how it took me so long to figure it out, and all I can say is that because I took for granted the real name Jean and fictional character Jean were the same person, it never even occurred to me that they might not be. Them being the same person was the null hypothesis, and the idea that they might not be, that real name Jean might be pretending, was so incredibly crackers that it never crossed my mind, not once. You're probably still wondering how I could simply have taken for granted that real name Jean was my friend when he gave so many hints that he wasn't. And I have to remind you the degree to which he simply went along with everything I said. I would talk about stuff specific to my friend, stuff that must not have made any sense to the man I will now call fake Jean, and he would act like he knew what I was talking about. The idea that he was lying, faking, or delusional was unthinkably bizarre.